Good morning. I have almost time to begin, but we've got several that we need to keep in our prayers, so I'm going to go ahead and name a few folks first. We've got people traveling. We need to keep the Prossers in our thoughts and prayers. They're in Arkansas now on the trip. Keep Lisa in your prayers. Patricia Abrams sent an email this morning that Tabitha has the COVID, and since they had taken care of Aiden and been exposed, they're not coming today. Jim has gone to get Diane. She had the bad lung infection, pneumonia lung infection, so she'll get to go home today, hopefully. Holly's sister has COVID. She works at the police department over in Tallahassee, and she'd been exposed and came down with it. So she and her mom are staying isolated away from Holly and Jay. So keep them in your prayers. Always keep Brother Terry in your prayers. And Sister Lisa, I see you're back. I guess your treatment went okay. Okay. Well, but like I said earlier, keep her in your prayers. Anyone else on the sick, injured, or walking wounded list or traveling that we need to keep in our I'm sorry? Oh, okay. Well, praying for a safe trip for you. And you're going to Georgia Wednesday, so keep the Weldons in your prayers for that safe trip. Brother Jeremy, would you lead us in a prayer before we begin, please? Amen. Wednesday night, Brother Clonch had gone through Christ and talking about rejection. And the next thing on the list is talking about Christ's true family. And today I'm going to go through, I know I'm not going to finish, but we'll get as far as we can on chapter 24 of Matthew, because I believe that it is one of the most misunderstood and abused chapters in the Bible. And it leads directly and indirectly along with Christ's true family. Because if you recall back in chapter 22, Christ is entering Jerusalem for the last time. Chapter 23 of Matthew, then he goes in with all the woes against the Pharisees. But I want to start in Luke chapter 19. If you look at Luke chapter 19 and verse 41, and this is Luke's version of when they're coming back to Jerusalem and get to the site. In verse 41 it says, "And when he was come near, he beheld the city," which was the city of Jerusalem, "and wept over it." Now he is not weeping for the physical city. He would be weeping for the inhabitants of that city. I wanted to start there to show you just how much compassion and love Christ had for humanity. And he is coming back to Jerusalem, to the place where they're about to put him to death. And then if we go back to Matthew chapter 23 and pick up verse 33, there he calls them serpents and generations of vipers and all. And then if we skip down to verse 37, it says, O Jerusalem, Jerusalem, thou that killest the prophets, stonest them which are sent unto thee, how often would I have gathered thy children together, even as a hen gathered her chickens under her wings, and you would not. Behold, your house is left unto you desolate. For I say unto you, you shall not see me henceforth till you shall say, blessed is he that cometh in the name of the Lord. The house there would be the temple. So that's getting us set up for chapter 24. The reason I say chapter 24 is the most abused and misunderstood chapter in the Bible is that a lot of people in the religious world want to run to this chapter, look at one phrase in there, and then set it up as though this chapter and other verses will predict the end of the world, end times. Which, if you look at this chapter in context and you look at it in a timeline, you can see that it is not talking about a far distant event. Let's just start by looking at verse 1. Jesus went out and departed from the temple, and his disciples came to him for to show him the buildings of the temple. Tie in Mark 13:1 with that. Look at Mark 13:1. Well, I can't, my fingers won't work my pages. But anyway, Mark 13:1, if you're there, it talks about looking at the building, how it's constructed, the stones that make up the building. So as Jesus is walking out of the temple, showing them the temple and the temple area, it is obvious that they're looking at a part of Jerusalem, that the temple area. And then in verse 2, it said, Jesus said unto them, see ye not all these things? Verily I say unto you, there shall not be left here one stone upon another that shall not be thrown down. So in what most people have a problem with is they look at this and they want to immediately say that this is what the Bible is telling us today, without looking at who the Bible was speaking to. So who was Christ speaking to at this particular time? When he said unto them, who is the unto them that he's talking about or talking to? His disciples, those that were close to him. What had they just left? The temple, where they all gathered to meet and everything bad was going on. And when it said that there shall not be one stone left upon another, that goes back and fulfills the prophecy or the comments made by Micah in Micah 3 and verse 12, where it said, therefore shall Zion, and what's Zion interchanged with? Jerusalem. Therefore shall Zion for your sake be plowed as a field, and Jerusalem shall become heaps, and the mountain of the houses, high places of the forest. When we get on over into the chapter about the actual siege and destruction of Jerusalem, we find out that all the stones were pushed down. Everything was flattened, and even the foundation was broken up. Is that not what Micah just said? It's going to be like even the foundation of the temple is going to be plowed up. And then as he sat upon the Mount of Olives, that's just a short distance from Jerusalem. And if you go to the Mount of Olives, you can get a view of the whole city. So as they're up there, the disciples came unto him privately, saying, now did all the disciples come to him? If you look at Mark 13:3, it tells you which ones were there. And as he sat upon the Mount of Olives over against the temple, Peter, James, John, and Andrew asked him privately. So 4 of his disciples come to him while he's on the mountain there, saying, tell us what these shall be. When shall these things be? What is their question in regard to? I'm sorry? The building that they had just looked at that he said was going to be flattened, they're now saying, when is this going to happen? And the setting at the time, the Jews and the Romans, during Roman occupation, it was always kind of a tenuous relationship that would go back and forth, sometimes better than others. But at this particular time, there was more harmony going on because if you recall, just a few chapters later, what does Pilate try to do? He tries to save Jesus' life. I find no fault in him. However, to make peace with the Jews, what did he do? Had him put to death to try to keep peace and harmony. So at this particular time, things are going fairly well. So when he's saying that these things are going to be flattened, that's almost the same as him saying, you're going to kill me, but in 3 days I'm going to rise again, which had never happened. Then they follow that up with, what will be the sign of thy coming and the end of the world? And that is where people go way off course. All of that is formulated in basically one question with 3 parts. But the end of the world or the end of the time for them would be specifically when they're talking about that temple at Jerusalem. And we're going to see that as we go a little bit farther along. Because in verse 4, Jesus answered and said unto them, take heed that no man deceive you. For many shall come in my name, saying, I am Christ, and shall deceive many. So before he even starts to respond to their answer or their question, what does he do? When he tells them to take heed, what is he doing? He is warning them. He's going to tell them what's going to take place, but he's warning them that others are going to come pretending and not be factual about things. Take heed, let no man deceive you. We find that again in the book of Ephesians chapter 5 and also in 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 and 3 where it says, let no one deceive you. And now, verse 6 is a key verse because many people, when they read it, it says, and ye shall hear of wars and rumors of wars. See that ye be not troubled, for these things must come to pass, but the end is not yet. The majority of people that read that, what do they automatically look at? What's going on in the world today? How the world has been since the time of Christ. But, in my opinion, they fail to comprehend what was going on the 40 years between this time and when Jerusalem was destroyed. Because was wars and rumors of wars going on immediately after Christ's death up through Jerusalem? Absolutely. If you recall, a couple of weeks ago, we said that Augustus Caesar was the Caesar when Christ was born. Tiberius Caesar was the Caesar when Christ died. Then there was Caligula, who was a very evil Caesar. Most people think that he was insane. But he only ruled for a few years before his death, but he made the comment. Now, he only ruled between 37 and 41 AD, so they only about a 4-year reign. But during that period of time, he had decreed that his statue would be placed in the temple. What would that mean to the Jews to have a temple of or a statue of a Caesar placed in a temple, in a holy place? Defiled, desecrated. Would that not then be a cause for the Jews to have an uprising and things not go well, maybe even war? So rumors of wars were immediate upon the scene. And then if you look at the next part of that verse that says, or verse 6, nation shall rise against nation. I'm going to pause, and kingdom against kingdom. And there shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes in divers places. Literally, there are hundreds of thousands of earthquakes every year. There's an earthquake someplace on this earth every day. So we can rule that out as being anything that you can hang your hat on as far as a sign. What usually follows war, besides peace? But there's war, and then what about the places that are left destroyed? Leads into famines, pestilence, and things of that nature. And if you recall, when it says the part nation against nation, it was during that 40-year period of time that what happened to the Jews in Caesarea? They were expelled. They were run out. About 20,000 killed. So all of this was going on during that 40-year period of time between Christ and the destruction of Jerusalem. And what he had said was all of these, you're going to see all these things, but the end is not yet. So don't hang your hat on all these signs, on signs about wars, rumors of wars, pestilences, famines, and all like that, because that's not it. He's going to give them the clue of when this temple is going to be destroyed. Jerusalem's going to be destroyed a little bit later, but he's saying don't pay attention to all these things. Why is he telling them not to pay attention to these things? How did he start out? Take heed. People are going to come and pretend that there's something that they're not. They're going to deceive you. How are they going to deceive you? All of this. Today, if you look back, and Brother Terry has mentioned it a time or two in classes and lessons and all, how many times has one religious group said that the end of the world was going to be here on a specific date, that date come and go, and then they change their mind to another date, that date come and go? Where are they getting this information? Their imagination. They're making it up. They're trying to make things that put things together that don't belong. Christ had said, don't pay attention to all this. And then he said, all of these are the beginnings of sorrows. Also, during this time of famine, after Caligula died, killed, suicide, whichever commentary you look at that puts him in perspective, Claudius came on the scene. During Claudius' time, there was a great famine in the land. So I'm adding this just to show you that all these things were taking place during that 40-year time period, and we don't have to look at the Dust Bowl or anything current to get to where we are. All of these are the beginning of sorrows. Verse 9, then shall they deliver you up to be afflicted, and shall kill you, and you shall be hated of all nations for my name's sake. Is that today? Yeah. In other countries, people, because they're Christians. Did it take place then? And as we skip over a few years after Claudius died in 58 AD, who became Caesar? Nero. Going on from 58 to 68 with Nero. Great persecutions and afflictions. Let's read a little bit farther. And then many shall be offended and shall betray one another and shall hate one another. And many false prophets shall rise and shall deceive many. And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold. Wax means to become. So what does the phrase wax cold or become cold mean? That many Christians are going to leave because Nero is taking and killing them. Nero was such an evil person that you can sort of understand why those that are weak, and there are weak Christians and there are strong Christians and there are mediocre. But if a Christian is not strong, you can understand under Nero's persecution why many would hide and deny and go their way, because he was such an evil person that he would have candlelight dinners on his portico, and the candles would be Christians that would be skewered and set aflame on the walkways. He would torch, they would be the human torches as he sat and ate. So very evil person. And all of this was taking place. And then verse 13 caps it off by saying, but he that shall endure unto the end, the same shall be saved. What happened in 68 AD with Nero? Committed suicide. Why? He was crazy. And you've heard of the comment, Nero fiddled while Rome burned. Most books, most authorities, most historians, when it gets right down to it, puts the blame on Nero, that Nero was the cause of the fire. But who did he blame? Christians. And then because he was insane, 68, he killed himself. 68 ties in with a little bit later in this chapter when we get to the actual sign of the destruction of Jerusalem and get into that part. And this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached unto all the world for a witness unto all nations, and then shall the end come. Well, the end is not going to come until all nations have had a chance to hear. Many years ago, when I was driving a truck, I was up in someplace, I can't remember if it was New Hampshire or New something, one of Vermont, one of them places up there. I could not get into a discussion with anybody on politics or religion. However, if they brought the subject up, I could talk with them. I just couldn't be the one to bring it up. That was company rules. But this one fella brought up the conversation, and he said, we are the first time in history that the message has gotten out to all the world. So the time is getting close to an end. And I said, how do you figure that? And he said, and he went right here. Matthew said that it should be preached unto all nations, and then the end shall come. And we are the first ones that have been able to communicate to the whole world and get the message out. I said, what are you going to do about Colossians 1, verse 23? He said, what do you mean? I said, well, the book of Colossians, I said, when was it written? He didn't know. And I said, the book of Colossians was written 60 to 62 AD, depending on who you listen to or which authority you go to. And I said, in Colossians 1:23, and I'm going to read it instead of quote it to you. If you continue in the faith, grounded and settled, and be not moved away from the hope of the gospel which ye have heard, and which was preached to every creature which is under heaven, whereof I, Paul, am made a minister. I didn't read the whole thing to him or quote the whole thing. I just said Colossians 1:23 said that Paul had spread the word to the whole. His only comment was, well, Paul was the then known world. Christ was, in Matthew, was talking about the whole world as we know it. They got an answer for everything, but how does that work? How does that work? That Christ is talking about one thing, and Paul, being an apostle preaching Christ, is talking about something totally different. Brother Clarence, you got something on your mind?
Limited time frame, because they about this is the beginning, and 13 and 14 says the end, sin of the world, and once we talk about things that are going to occur after that, you have to have something else in mind other than complete end of all things.
That's correct, which leads us back to Jerusalem. In verse 15, when ye therefore shall see the abomination and desolation spoken of by Daniel the prophet, stand in the holy place, whoso readeth, let him understand. He immediately goes, this ties in with what Brother Clint said, that there's a time frame here that beginning and end is in a short period, which takes us back to this. But he is telling them, if you read, which is referenced in the Old Testament, Daniel 9:23, when ye therefore shall see the abomination of desolation spoken of by Daniel, stand in the holy place. What is the holy place? It's the temple. What is the abomination of desolation? That's the Roman army. In 68 AD, under Vespasian, he was the general, they surrounded Jerusalem, surrounded the temple, built siege mounds. We'll get into that a little bit more later too. But they also put their ensign in the doors and around the temple area. What is an ensign? Flag, staff. And for your information, the Roman ensign was very, very similar to the Nazi ensign, the eagle. But because the Nazis got it, Hitler got it from the Romans. But anyway, with their emblem being there in the temple area, they were as Brother Moody said, they are defiling, desecrating that temple area. So in 68 AD, while Nero was still alive, Vespasian was the general of the army, and they built siege mounds and they surrounded Jerusalem. The siege wouldn't take place for a couple of years later, and that's because Caesar killed himself. Well, Vespasian, being a general in the army, the Roman army did not move, didn't go to bed, didn't sleep, didn't eat without direct instructions from the headquarters, the Caesar. So Vespasian left his son Titus in charge, and he went back to Rome to figure out what was going on. In the meantime, Galba, Otho, Vitellius all became Caesars and all died within an 18-month period of time. There was such a squabble going on that they couldn't get things lined up, and they either committed suicide or were killed. And again, depending on which commentary you read on the subject. I like to go to Josephus on it. I think he's more accurate than most. And then, but Vespasian became the next Caesar because the people wanted him. Vespasian, if you go back to Daniel, and this is just food for thought. This is the way it is, but this is food for thought. When Daniel is talking about the little horn rooting out the big horns, the big horns would have been Nero, Galba, Otho, and Vitellius because they came from nobility. Vespasian was a commoner. He started out in the army as a private, and now he's general over the army, and now he is Caesar. Something to chew on, something to think about. He starts out as a little man, and now he's the big man with his son Titus in charge. So, picking up with verse 16 through 20, it says, "Let them which be in Judea flee into the mountains. Let him which is on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house. Neither let him which is in the field return back to take his clothes. And woe unto them that are with child, and to them that give suck in those days. But pray ye that your flight be not in the winter, neither on the Sabbath day." Sabbath day, it was customary for them to close the doors of the city, so it would prevent people from leaving, escaping. Winter means harsh times. Women with young children, families with young children, it also makes things difficult. But it said, do all of this.